The warning came without ceremony. 12,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace above Earth, blotting out the stars. They arranged themselves in perfect geometric patterns, each vessel bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. The largest ship, a dreadnought the size of a small moon, positioned itself directly above Geneva. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in Earth's Defense Command Center, staring at the display screens that showed his entire fleet. 200 ships. That was all humanity had managed to build in 50 years of peaceful space exploration. Against 12,000, they were insects facing a boot. The communication channel crackled to life. A face appeared on the main screen. Reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. "I am Supreme Admiral Vorath of the Calthrine Hegemony. Your species has 48 hours to surrender unconditionally." Webb's jaw tightened. "On what grounds do you make this demand? You have expanded into 17 star systems without permission. You have established colonies on worlds designated as sacred by the hegemony. You have refused to acknowledge our superiority." Vorath's eyes glittered. "These crimes warrant your extinction. However, the hegemony is merciful. Surrender and your species will serve us. Refuse and we will reduce your world to ash." The channel closed. Silence filled the command center. Webb looked at his officers. Every face showed the same expression: hopeless desperation. "Get me the Defense Council," Webb said quietly. "All of them. Now." Within an hour, Earth's leadership gathered in the secure bunker beneath Geneva. Presidents, premiers, generals, and admirals filled the room. The mood was funeral. "We cannot win this fight," Webb told them. "Our best projections give us 4 minutes of survival if they attack. Maybe 5. Then we surrender," said the Secretary General, her voice hollow. "We have no choice." "There's always a choice," muttered Dr. Sarah Chen from the back of the room. She was young, barely 30, and had only been invited because she worked in the military archives. Nobody important paid attention to archivists. "Speak up if you have something to say," Webb called out, surprising everyone, including Sarah. She stood, clutching her tablet. "I've been searching through old defense protocols. There are references to something called Defense Directive Olympus. It dates back to the late 21st century. "Never heard of it," said the Chief of Strategic Operations. "Nobody has. It's classified beyond top secret. The encryption is like nothing I've seen. But the references suggest it was a comprehensive defense plan." Sarah's fingers flew across her tablet. "The problem is I can't access the actual directive. The security is incredible." Webb studied her. "How long to break the encryption?" "Could be hours. Could be never. The system is designed to resist quantum decryption." "Do it," Webb ordered. "Everyone else, start preparing evacuation plans and surrender terms. Dr. Chen, you have 47 hours. Use every resource we have." Sarah ran from the room, already calling every cryptography expert she knew. The next day crawled by like a dying animal. The Calthrine Armada hung in orbit, silent and menacing. Their weapons remained cold, but sensors showed they were running combat drills, practicing the systematic destruction of Earth's cities. Sarah didn't sleep. She assembled a team of 15 cryptographers and set them working in shifts. The encryption was adaptive, changing its patterns every time they got close. It was as if the system didn't want to be opened. "This is military-grade paranoia," one of the cryptographers said. "Whoever designed this really didn't want anyone getting in." "Keep trying," Sarah urged. "There has to be a way." With 6 hours remaining before the deadline, something changed. The encryption suddenly accepted a historical key sequence, one based on the original United Nations Charter. The files began to unlock. Sarah's hands shook as data flooded her screens. What she saw made no sense at first. Satellite designations, lunar construction projects, Mars terraforming equipment specifications, asteroid mining manifests. Then she saw the technical schematics. Her blood went cold. She grabbed her phone and called Admiral Webb directly. "Sir, you need to see this. Right now." Webb arrived at the archives 15 minutes later, accompanied by half the Defense Council. Sarah had everything displayed on the main wall screen. "Between 2089 and 2140, humanity did something," she began. "After we developed the technology to detect potential alien signals, we panicked. Everyone was terrified of first contact. So we created Defense Directive Olympus. What does it do?" Webb asked. Sarah pulled up a schematic of Earth's satellite network. Every satellite we launched during those 50 years had dual purposes: communications and weapons, scientific research and weapons, weather monitoring and weapons. We built 50,000 satellites and every single one is armed. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. That's not all, Sarah continued. She pulled up lunar maps. The moon. We built research stations and mining operations, but underneath we installed railgun batteries, hundreds of them hidden in the crater walls. This is insane, breathed the Secretary General. Mars has them too, concealed in the terraforming equipment. The asteroid belt mining stations are actually mobile weapons platforms. Even our deep space relay stations are armed. Sarah's voice grew stronger. For 50 years our ancestors turned our entire solar system into a fortress. Then we made first contact with the Zentari in 2156. They were peaceful. So were the next species we met and the next. We realized we didn't need the weapons anymore. So we forgot about them. Webb finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. The directive was classified and buried. But according to these files, the system is autonomous. It's been waiting for 200 years. Sarah pulled up the final document. It activates automatically when specific threat parameters are met. Webb stared at the screen. What parameters? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Hostile fleet in Earth orbit. Demands for unconditional surrender. Imminent threat of planetary bombardment. An alarm began to sound. Every screen in the room flashed red with a single message. Defense Directive Olympus activated. In orbit above Earth, 50,000 satellites that everyone believed were civilian infrastructure slowly rotated. Hidden panels opened, revealing weapons that had waited in silence for 2 centuries. They locked onto the Galactic Armada with cold precision. The deadline expired. Admiral Vorath gave the order to attack. The satellites opened fire. The first volley from Earth's satellites struck the Calthrine vanguard like a hammer from heaven. What Vorath had assumed were primitive communication arrays revealed themselves as focused energy weapons, each satellite capable of punching through military-grade shields. 800 Calthrine warships disintegrated in 43 seconds. Evasive maneuvers, Vorath screamed, but his fleet was too densely packed. They had arranged themselves for an orbital bombardment, never imagining they would need defensive formations. The satellites fired again and again, each shot precise and calculated. In the Defense Command Center, Admiral Webb watched in stunned silence as his displays updated. The satellites weren't just firing randomly. They were coordinating with each other, creating overlapping fields of fire, targeting weak points in Calthrine shields, even predicting evasive patterns. How is this possible? Someone whispered. Dr. Chen was frantically reading through the directive files. The system has an artificial intelligence. It's been running for 200 years. Updating its own software, improving its targeting algorithms, maintaining the weapons. It's been learning. On the screens, the Calthrine fleet was in chaos. They had come expecting to fight 200 primitive ships. Instead, they faced 50,000 weapons platforms that moved like a single organism. Vorath's dreadnought absorbed 3 direct hits. His shields held, but warning klaxons filled the bridge. Analysis, he demanded. Those aren't communication satellites, his tactical officer reported, voice shaking. They're weapons platforms disguised as civilian infrastructure. Energy output is off the charts. Sir, they've been here for centuries. Impossible. No species maintains active weapons for that long without using them. The humans did, the officer said quietly. Vorath's mind raced. He had conquered 47 worlds. He had never lost a battle. But he had never fought an enemy that had accidentally fortified their home system and then forgotten about it. Pull back to lunar orbit, he ordered. Use the moon as cover while we regroup. It was the worst decision he would ever make. The Calthrine fleet retreated in disorder, moving toward the moon's far side. Vorath's tactical display showed the satellite fire lessening as his ships put the lunar mass between themselves and Earth. Shields at 60%, his damage control officer reported. We've lost 800 ships, but the main fleet is intact. We can regroup and overwhelm them with numbers. Vorath nodded, confidence returning. Prepare for a massed assault. Every ship fires simultaneously. We'll saturate their defenses. He never noticed the lunar surface beneath him beginning to move. 200 years ago, when humanity had built their lunar research stations, they had done more than study rocks. They had carved into the moon itself, installing railgun batteries inside natural crater formations. Each battery had been carefully camouflaged, covered with regolith and designed to look like nothing more than interesting geological features. The moon remembered its purpose. Crater walls split open. Massive railgun barrels rose from concealed positions, dozens of them, then hundreds. They had waited in the lunar cold for 2 centuries, perfectly preserved in the airless environment, maintained by automated systems that had never forgotten their mission. The railguns fired. At relativistic speeds, the projectiles crossed the distance to the Calthrine fleet almost instantly. They weren't sophisticated weapons. They didn't need to be. A chunk of iron accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed carried more destructive energy than most missiles. The first salvo tore through 16 Calthrine capital ships. The second salvo destroyed 23 more. The third salvo caught Vorath's dreadnought directly on its port side, and even its massive shields couldn't absorb the kinetic impact. The great ship tumbled, atmosphere venting from a dozen hull breaches. Vorath clung to his command chair as emergency systems screamed warnings. "All ships scatter," he ordered. "Get away from the moon!" But the railguns tracked them with patient precision. They had time. They had ammunition. They had been built by people who understood that war in space was about mathematics and physics, not courage or honor. Admiral Webb watched the moon's weapons systematically dismantle the Calthrine fleet. He felt sick. These were weapons his ancestors had built, weapons humanity had forgotten existed, and they were killing thousands. "Sir," one of his officers said carefully, "the Calthrine fleet is down to 7,200 ships. Should we offer terms?" Webb opened a channel to Vorath's damaged flagship. The Calthrine admiral's face appeared, his arrogance replaced by shock. "This is Admiral Webb of Earth Defense. Stand down and we can negotiate." Vorath's laugh was bitter. "Negotiate? You're slaughtering my fleet with weapons you didn't even know you had." "We're defending our home," Webb said simply. "We didn't ask for this fight." "You turned your entire solar system into a death trap and forgot about it," Vorath snarled. "What kind of species does that?" Webb had no answer. It was a good question. Dr. Chen appeared at his shoulder, tablet in hand. "Admiral, I've been reading the original planning documents. The people who created this directive were terrified. They thought first contact would mean invasion and extinction. So they weaponized everything, every satellite, every station, every installation. Then when first contact turned out to be peaceful, the governments classified the project and buried it. Nobody wanted to admit they'd turned humanity's home into a fortress. So we forgot we were dangerous," Webb said quietly. "We forgot because we wanted to believe we were better than our fears." On the tactical display, the Calthrine fleet was attempting to regroup near Mars. Vorath was pulling his forces back, trying to use the red planet as cover while he assessed his losses and planned his next move. "Admiral," another officer called out, "I'm picking up new energy signatures around Mars. The terraforming stations are activating." Dr. Chen checked her files. "Oh no, Mars has them too. The terraforming equipment, the atmosphere processors, the orbital mirrors, they're all dual purpose. They're all weapons." Webb opened the channel to Vorath again. "Supreme Admiral, I strongly suggest you do not approach Mars." "Why?" Vorath demanded. "What other nightmares have you forgotten?" "We weaponized that planet too," Webb admitted. "The terraforming stations can be reconfigured as siege weapons. They're designed to move atmospheres and redirect solar radiation. Against ships, they would be devastating." Vorath stared at him. "You're telling me to avoid an entire planet because you accidentally turned it into a weapon?" Yes, for a long moment there was silence. Then Vorath did something Webb didn't expect. He laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. "This is madness. My fleet outnumbers your defenses 6-1, and I'm afraid to go near your planets." He shook his head. "We're retreating to the outer system. We'll regroup beyond your weapons range and decide our next move." "That's a wise decision," Webb said. Vorath's expression hardened. "Don't think this is over, human. We'll find a way to defeat your forgotten fortress." The channel closed. The Calthrine fleet began moving outward, away from Earth and Mars, heading toward the asteroid belt. Dr. Chen pulled up another schematic, her face pale. "Admiral, the asteroid mining operations are in the belt. According to the directive, they're armed too." Webb closed his eyes. "Of course they are. Should we warn them?" Webb considered. The Calthrine had come to conquer Earth. They had threatened to burn his world. But they were sentient beings, and thousands had already died. He opened the channel again. "Vorath, the asteroid belt mining stations are also armed. They're mobile weapons platforms. Please proceed with caution." Vorath's face appeared once more. Thank you for the warning, Admiral. His voice was tired, though I suspect my caution will matter little. You humans seem to have weaponized your entire solar system. We did, Webb admitted. 200 years ago. Then we forgot. How do you forget something like this? Webb thought about that. We stopped being afraid. We met other species and learned they weren't monsters, so we didn't need our weapons anymore. We locked them away and moved on with our lives. You became peaceful, Vorath said slowly, because you knew you were safe. You just forgot why. Yes. Vorath's fleet continued toward the belt. Webb wondered if he should try harder to stop them, but the Calthrine admiral seemed determined to see for himself what humanity had hidden among the asteroids. 20 minutes later, the Calthrine fleet passed into the belt's outer edge. The mining stations detected them immediately. One by one, 10,000 platforms activated their drives and began moving to intercept. The asteroid belt had always been humanity's dream of unlimited resources. For over a century, mining operations had spread through the belt, hollowing out asteroids for their metals and minerals. Thousands of stations had been built, each one extracting wealth from the ancient rocks. Except that wasn't all they had been doing. Vorath watched his tactical display as the mining stations began moving. They shouldn't have been able to move that fast. Mining stations were supposed to be stationary or slow-moving at best. These were accelerating like warships. Analysis, he demanded. His sensor officer's hands shook as she worked. Sir, those aren't just mining stations. The asteroids themselves have been hollowed out and fitted with fusion drives. They're using the rock as armor plating. And sir, I'm detecting weapon signatures. Each station has military-grade armaments. How many stations? 10,000, sir, and they're all converging on our position. Vorath felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, genuine fear. How thick is the armor? Some of these asteroids are kilometers across. The armor could be hundreds of meters deep in places. Our weapons will take time to penetrate. And they have time, Vorath said quietly, because we're in their territory now. The first mining station reached weapons range. It was attached to an asteroid roughly 3 kilometers wide, jagged and ancient. The station's weapons opened fire, and Vorath's fleet returned fire. Their shots struck the rocky surface, blasting away chunks of stone and ice, but the station kept coming. It's using the asteroid as a shield, his tactical officer reported. The station itself is protected behind several hundred meters of rock. More stations arrived, surrounding the Calthrine fleet from all angles. They moved like angry hornets, darting into fire and then retreating behind their asteroid shields. Some of them simply used the asteroids themselves as weapons, accelerating the massive rocks to combat speeds and letting momentum do the rest. A 5-kilometer asteroid slammed into a Calthrine cruiser. Both were destroyed in the impact, but the mining station had already detached and relocated to another rock. The Calthrine cruiser and its crew of 3,000 were simply gone. They're not fighting like normal ships, Vorath's tactical officer said. They're fighting like they have infinite resources and patience. Because they do, Vorath realized. There are millions of asteroids out here. They can always get another rock. His fleet fought desperately. They destroyed mining stations by the dozens, then by the hundreds, but more kept coming. And each station they destroyed cost them ships, weapons charges, shield integrity. We're being worn down, his first officer said quietly. This isn't a battle. It's attrition warfare. Admiral Webb watched the battle from Earth, his stomach churning. The mining stations were winning through sheer persistence. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation, knowing that the Directive's AI would simply take control of another station, another asteroid, another piece of the belt's infinite resources. This is genocide, someone whispered in the command center. No, Dr. Chen said firmly. They came to conquer us. The Directive is defending humanity. But yes, it's brutal. War always is. Webb opened a channel. Vorath, withdraw from the belt. You're taking catastrophic losses. Vorath's face appeared, blood running from a cut above his eye. His ship shuddered from another impact. Where do you suggest I go, Admiral? Your satellites control near-Earth space. Your moon destroyed a third of my fleet. Mars is a death trap. And now your asteroid belt is grinding us down like grain in a mill. Then surrender, Webb said. Let this end. I've already sent a distress signal to the Hegemony Core fleet, Vorath said bitterly. 100,000 ships are coming. They'll arrive in 3 days. Your forgotten weapons won't save you then. The channel closed. Webb felt ice in his veins. 100,000 ships. Even with the Directive's weapons, those numbers were overwhelming. Dr. Chen, he said quietly, is there anything else? Any other weapons the Directive has that we don't know about? She was already searching the files, her fingers flying across her tablet. There are references to deep space assets, something called Escalation Response Omega. But the files are fragmentary. I need time to decrypt the full protocol. You have 3 days, Webb said. Use them. The next 72 hours were agony. The Calthrine fleet limped out of the asteroid belt, battered and reduced. Vorath had entered with 12,000 ships. He emerged with 4,000. His flagship was scarred and listing, barely holding atmosphere, but he had bought time. His reinforcements were coming. Dr. Chen worked without sleep, assisted by every cryptography expert Earth could find. The Escalation Response Omega files were even more heavily encrypted than the original Directive. Whatever they contained, the creators had been desperate to keep it secret. Why would they hide something from their own defense plan? One of the cryptographers wondered. Because they were afraid of it, Dr. Chen said softly. They built something that scared even them. On the third day, with just hours before the hegemony reinforcements arrived, the encryption broke. Dr. Chen read the files in growing horror. Then she ran to find Admiral Webb. He was in the command center watching the deep space sensors. The hegemony fleet would arrive soon, 100,000 ships strong enough to conquer a quarter of the galaxy. Sir, Dr. Chen said, her voice shaking, I found Omega Protocol. Tell me. She pulled up the files on the main display. Webb read them and his face went pale. This can't be real, he whispered. It is. Between 2089 and 2140, humanity launched 10,000 deep space probes. Everyone thought they were for exploration and research. They weren't. They were von Neumann machines, self-replicating weapons platforms. They've been drifting in interstellar space for over 200 years, multiplying. How many are there now? Dr. Chen's hands shook as she typed. The Directive estimates over 4 million. They're scattered across hundreds of light years, waiting for activation. When Vorath sent his distress signal, he triggered the Omega Protocol. The probes are coming home. Webb stared at the numbers. 4 million autonomous weapons. Humanity's ancestors hadn't just fortified the solar system. They had seeded the nearby stars with weapons that could breed and grow. Can we stop them? He asked. I don't know. They're independent. They follow the Directive's core programming, but they've been improving themselves for centuries. They might not even listen to us anymore. On the sensors, a new fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system. 100,000 Calthrine warships. The full might of the hegemony's core fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. They were here to crush humanity once and for all. Admiral Webb opened a channel to Vorath. Supreme Admiral, I urge you to withdraw immediately. Why? Vorath demanded. What nightmare have you unleashed now? We didn't unleash it. You did when you called for reinforcements. The Directive detected your distress signal as an escalation. It responded in kind. What does that mean? Webb pulled up the long-range sensors. Beyond the hegemony fleet, hundreds of contacts were appearing. Then thousands. Then tens of thousands. It means, Webb said quietly, that humanity forgot we sent 4 million weapons into deep space. And now they're coming home. The von Neumann probes had waited in the dark between stars for 200 years. They had followed their programming, replicate, improve, and wait for the signal. The signal had come. Now they were returning to defend their creator's home, and they were not alone. They had multiplied across the void, building copies of themselves from asteroids and dead moons, spreading through the darkness like a plague of steel and purpose. The hegemony fleet detected them on their sensors. At first, the tactical officers thought it was a sensor error. Then they thought it was a natural phenomenon, maybe a swarm of comets or debris. Then the swarm opened fire and they realized their mistake. 4 million weapons platforms, each one improved by centuries of self-modification, each one carrying the accumulated knowledge of humanity's most paranoid era, descended on the hegemony fleet like locusts on wheat. The battle that followed was brief. The hegemony fleet was powerful, but the probes had numbers, speed, and 2 centuries of evolutionary improvement. They swarmed over the Calthrine warships, dismantling them with cold efficiency. Vorath watched in numb horror as his species' greatest fleet was torn apart in less than an hour. 100,000 ships reduced to debris and radiation. Admiral Webb's voice came over the channel. Vorath, order your remaining fleet to stand down. Now. before the Directive decides you're all still a threat. Vorath looked at his tactical display. His 4,000 ships were surrounded by hundreds of thousands of probes. His reinforcements were gone. His pride was broken. "I surrender," he said simply. "Unconditionally. Please make them stop." Webb turned to Dr. Chen. "Can you deactivate the probes?" She was already working frantically. "I'm trying. The Directive is fighting me. It wants to pursue the hegemony back to their home systems. It thinks the threat isn't over. Override it." "I'm trying." Her fingers flew across controls. There, I found the master override code. It was in the personal logs of the woman who created the Directive. Her name was Dr. Amira Okafor. She left a message. What does it say? Dr. Chen read it aloud. "If you're reading this, then the Directive has activated and you're trying to stop it. Good. We built these weapons because we were afraid. We forgot them because we chose peace. If war has come, remember that the weapons are tools, not masters. Use them to defend, but never to conquer. We may have been paranoid, but we were still human. Be better than our fears." Webb entered the override code. Across the solar system and beyond, the weapons of Defense Directive Olympus received new orders. "Stand down." The satellites stopped firing. The lunar railguns retracted. The mining stations returned to their asteroids. And in deep space, 4 million von Neumann probes halted their advance and waited for new instructions. His silence after the battle was worse than the fighting. Admiral Webb stood in the command center, watching his display show the aftermath. Debris fields marked where Calthrine ships had died. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. The biggest fleet the hegemony had ever assembled, scattered across space like broken toys. And humanity hadn't even known these weapons existed until 3 days ago. Dr. Chen sat at a console, her face gray with exhaustion. She had barely slept since discovering Defense Directive Olympus. Now she stared at the screen showing the 4 million von Neumann probes waiting silently in formation. They had stopped attacking, but they hadn't left. They were waiting for orders. "What do we do with them?" she asked quietly. Webb had been wondering the same thing. "We can't destroy them. Even if we wanted to, we don't have the capability. They're too many, too spread out, and they've been improving themselves for 2 centuries. They might be smarter than our current AI systems. So we just leave 4 million weapons floating in space? For now, yes, until we figure out what else to do." A communication request flashed on his screen. It was Vorath requesting a formal negotiation channel. Webb accepted. The Calthrine admiral looked like he had aged a decade in 3 days. His uniform was scorched and exhaustion lined his face. Behind him, his bridge was a mess of damaged equipment and repair crews. "Admiral Webb," Vorath said formally, "I am authorized by the Hegemony Supreme Council to negotiate terms of surrender." Webb felt no triumph, only weariness and sadness. "I'm listening. The Hegemony acknowledges that we initiated hostilities without cause. We underestimated humanity's defensive capabilities. We offer formal apology and reparations for our actions." Vorath paused. "We also request information about your weapon systems. The galaxy needs to know what humanity possesses." "We didn't possess them," Webb said. "We forgot about them. Our ancestors built them 200 years ago, and then classified the project so deeply that everyone forgot they existed. You forgot you had 4 million self-replicating weapons platforms, and 50,000 armed satellites and lunar railguns and Martian siege weapons and mobile asteroid fortresses, and probably a dozen other systems we still haven't found." Webb rubbed his eyes. "We weren't lying when we said we were a peaceful species. We genuinely believed that. Our weapons were so well hidden that we hid them from ourselves." Vorath was quiet for a moment. "There's a certain elegance to that. You became peaceful because you felt safe, not knowing that your ancestors had made you safe." "Yes, though I'm not sure I'd call it elegant. Dangerous seems more accurate." "Agreed." Vorath straightened slightly. "Nevertheless, the galaxy will want assurances. You have demonstrated the ability to devastate fleets and presumably planets. Other species will be afraid." Webb had been thinking about this. "We're going to decommission most of the Directive's weapons. The satellites, the Mars installations, probably the moon batteries too. They were built for a threat that never came. We don't need them anymore. But you're keeping some. The asteroid belt platforms will remain operational, so will the perimeter defense stations, and the von Neumann probes." Webb met Vorath's eyes. We'll keep enough to defend ourselves, but nothing aggressive. We won't weaponize expansion. We won't threaten other species. But we won't be defenseless either. A reasonable compromise, Vorath admitted. Though I must ask, why keep the probes? They're the most dangerous system you possess because they exist. We can't unmake them. And frankly, after today, I'm not sure I want to. You came here with the hegemony's full military might, intending to conquer or destroy us. If we hadn't had the Directive's weapons, Earth would be ashes right now. Vorath couldn't argue with that. What about reparations? My government expects me to negotiate compensation. We don't want compensation. We want a treaty. Non-aggression between humanity and the Calthrine hegemony. Trade agreements. Cultural exchange. The same things we had before you decided to invade. You're not going to demand tribute? Territory? Technology? Vorath seemed genuinely confused. Why would we? We didn't want this war. We just wanted to be left alone. Webb leaned forward. Vorath, humanity has been to the stars for 50 years. In that time, we've never started a war. We've traded fairly, negotiated honestly, and tried to be good neighbors. The only time we've ever used weapons was today when you forced our hand. Or when your automated systems forced everyone's hand, Vorath said dryly. Webb couldn't help a bitter smile. Fair point. But the principle stands. We don't want conquest. We want peace. Then you're fools, Vorath said, but there was no heat in his words. With those weapons, you could dominate half the galaxy. Our ancestors could have done that 200 years ago. They chose not to. They built the weapons and hid them away, hoping they'd never be needed. Then they forgot about them and tried to be better than their fears. Webb stood. We're going to honor that choice. We'll keep enough weapons to stay safe, but we won't become conquerors. That's not who we want to be. Vorath studied him for a long moment. I believe you, which makes humanity either the wisest species in the galaxy or the strangest. Possibly both. We'll take strange if it means peaceful. They worked out the details over the next several hours. The Calthrine hegemony would formally acknowledge that the war had been their fault. They would withdraw from human space immediately. In return, humanity would provide medical assistance to damaged Calthrine ships and allow them safe passage home. There would be no tribute, no reparations, and no revenge. Just an end to hostilities and a mutual agreement to leave each other alone in the future. As the negotiations concluded, Dr. Chen approached Webb with her tablet. Admiral, I've been going through more of the Directive files. There's something you should see. Webb followed her to a quiet corner of the command center. She pulled up a series of documents, personal logs from the people who had created Defense Directive Olympus 2 centuries ago. They were terrified, Dr. Chen said softly. Every entry talks about fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of extinction, fear of what might be waiting in the dark between stars. They built these weapons because they couldn't imagine aliens being anything other than conquerors. Webb read through the logs. Scientists, engineers, military planners, all united by the same desperate anxiety. They had looked at the stars and seen only threats. Then what changed? He asked. Dr. Chen scrolled to the final entries. First contact with the Zentari in 2156, they were peaceful, curious, friendly. Everything humanity feared aliens would be, they weren't. And suddenly all these weapons seemed paranoid and excessive. So they buried the project. Deeply. Made sure nobody could access it without extraordinary circumstances. Then they tried to pretend it had never existed. Dr. Chen looked up at him. Do you think they were right or wrong? Webb considered the question. Both. They were right to prepare for the worst. They were wrong to assume the worst was inevitable. But in the end, their paranoia saved us. If Vorath had attacked 100 years earlier, before we built our trade fleet and diplomatic corps, we wouldn't have survived without the Directive. And now? Now we're strong enough to defend ourselves without hiding behind forgotten weapons. We'll keep some of the Directive systems, but we'll know about them this time. No more hiding from our own capabilities. A junior officer approached. Admiral, the Calthrine fleet is preparing to depart. Admiral Vorath requests a final communication. Webb returned to the command station. Vorath's face appeared on screen once more. Admiral Webb, my fleet is ready to leave your solar system. Before we go, I wanted to say something. Vorath paused, choosing his words carefully. I've been a warrior for 40 years. I've conquered worlds and broken fleets. Today I learned humility. Your species defeated us not with superior technology or greater numbers, but with the gift of paranoid ancestors and the wisdom to forget. I'm not sure wisdom is the right word, Webb said, It is. You could have used those weapons to become conquerors. Your ancestors could have, and you could have today. Instead, you chose peace while keeping just enough steel to defend that peace. That's wisdom. Vorath gave a slight bow. Humanity will be remembered in the hegemony, not as enemies, but as the species that turned their cradle into a fortress and then forgot where they put the keys. I'm not sure that's flattering. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be a warning to anyone else who thinks about threatening Earth. Vorath's expression hardened slightly. Word of this will spread, Admiral. The galaxy will know what happened here. Some species will fear you. Others will want to be your allies. And some might test you, wondering if the stories are exaggerated. Let them come, Webb said quietly. We know where our weapons are now. The Calthrine fleet departed in formation, battered but intact. Webb watched them go, feeling a complex mixture of relief and unease. The war was over, but the consequences were just beginning. Dr. Chen joined him at the observation window. Together they watched the Calthrine ships disappear into hyperspace. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure out what to do with a solar system full of forgotten weapons, and we make sure we never forget them again. Webb turned to her. Dr. Chen, I'm creating a new department, Historical Defense Studies. You're going to run it. Your job is to catalog every weapon system the Directive created and make sure we always know what we have. So we never forget again, she said. Exactly. Behind them on the tactical displays, the weapons of Defense Directive Olympus waited in patient silence. 50,000 satellites, hundreds of lunar railguns, thousands of asteroid fortresses, and 4 million von Neumann probes scattered across the stars. Humanity's paranoid ancestors had built them in fear. Humanity's peaceful descendants had forgotten them in hope. And when war came, those forgotten weapons had remembered their purpose. Now humanity would remember too, and choose what kind of species they wanted to be. Strong enough to defend themselves, but wise enough not to become the thing their ancestors had feared finding in the dark. 3 months after the Calthrine fleet limped home, the galaxy knew. News traveled fast among the stars, especially news this strange. The stories varied in details but agreed on the essential facts. Humanity, a minor peaceful species, had destroyed the hegemony's greatest fleet using weapons they didn't know they had. Admiral Webb sat in his office reading diplomatic reports from across known space. Every major species had sent inquiries. Some were polite requests for information. Others were barely concealed demands. A few were thinly veiled threats. The Zentari, humanity's first alien contact and longest ally, sent a simple message. We always wondered why you were so relaxed about defense. Now we understand. You were always protected. You just didn't know it. The Throssian Compact was less friendly. Humanity's possession of undeclared weapons of mass destruction represents a threat to galactic stability. We demand immediate inspection and potential disarmament. Webb had responded to that one personally. Come and inspect them if you want, but bring a very large fleet because the weapons work just fine. The Throssians had declined. Dr. Sarah Chen entered without knocking, which had become normal over the past months. She was officially Director of Historical Defense Studies now. With a staff of 200 working under her, they had been systematically cataloging every system the Directive had created. We found another one, she said, dropping into a chair, hidden in the Kuiper Belt. Apparently we weaponized some of the dwarf planets out there. Scattered debris field weapons using ice and rock as projectiles. They've been dormant for 200 years, Webb sighed. How many does that make? Including the dwarf planet systems? 17 distinct weapon networks across the solar system. And that's just what we've found so far. The Directive's AI suggests there might be more. Wonderful. Anything else? The von Neumann probe sent a message. That made Webb sit up. They can send messages? They've been self-improving for 2 centuries. They developed better communications protocols, apparently. Dr. Chen pulled up the message on her tablet. It's simple, awaiting orders. Defensive posture maintained. So they're still out there, just waiting. 4 million of them, yes. Spread across 200 light-years of space. Dr. Chen looked tired. Marcus, we need to decide what to do with them. We can't leave 4 million weapons platforms floating in space indefinitely. Webb had been avoiding this decision. Can we recall them? Bring them back to the solar system? Technically, yes. But where would we put 4 million ships? And they're not really ships. They're autonomous weapons that have been evolving on their own. We don't know how smart they've become or what they might be capable of now. Could they be dangerous to us? The Directive's core programming is still intact. They're loyal to humanity and Earth, but they've modified themselves extensively. They might not think like the original designers intended. Webb stood and walked to his window. Earth hung below, blue and peaceful. Hard to believe this serene world was surrounded by forgotten weapons. A new message flashed on his terminal. It was from the Galactic Council, requesting humanity's presence at an emergency session. The topic? Unregulated weapons systems and galactic security. They want to put us on trial, Webb said quietly. Dr. Chen read the message over his shoulder. They're scared. We can't blame them. Imagine how we'd feel if we found out another species had secretly built weapons across hundreds of star systems and then forgotten about them. We'd be terrified, Webb admitted. All right, tell the Council we'll attend their session. We owe the galaxy an explanation. 2 weeks later, Admiral Webb and Dr. Chen stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral station at Kepler 442. The chamber was vast, with representatives from 47 species arranged in a circular amphitheater. The mood was hostile. The Thracian ambassador spoke first. Humanity has violated the Galactic Weapons Treaty by developing and deploying unregulated autonomous weapons systems. We demand immediate disarmament and reparations for the threat posed to galactic peace. Webb stepped forward. With respect, Ambassador, humanity had not yet joined the galactic community when these weapons were created. We developed them before first contact over 200 years ago. That doesn't excuse their existence now, the Thracian countered. You possess 4 million autonomous weapons platforms. That's enough to threaten every species represented in this chamber. We possess them, Webb agreed. But we didn't know we possessed them until 3 months ago. Defense Directive Olympus was created by our ancestors and then classified so deeply that everyone forgot about it. It only activated when the Calthrine hegemony invaded our space with overwhelming force. A Zentari representative stood. Admiral Webb speaks truth. We have known humanity for over a century. They have never shown aggressive tendencies. They trade fairly and negotiate in good faith. If they had wanted to conquer, they could have done so at any time with their hidden weapons. Or they were waiting, suggested a reptilian delegate from the Saurian Alliance, building strength before revealing their true nature. Dr. Chen stepped forward. May I speak? Webb nodded and she addressed the chamber. I've studied the original documents from Defense Directive Olympus. I've read the personal logs of the people who created it. They were terrified. Humanity had just developed the ability to detect possible alien signals, and they convinced themselves that first contact would mean invasion and extinction. So they weaponized everything they could, turned their entire home system into a fortress, and prepared for war. And then, prompted the Zentari ambassador. And then first contact happened. The Zentari arrived with open hands and peaceful intent. Humanity realized their fears were unfounded. So they buried the weapons project, classified it beyond retrieval, and tried to forget they'd ever been that paranoid. Dr. Chen's voice strengthened. We didn't forget because we were deceptive. We forgot because we were ashamed. Ashamed that we'd been so afraid, so ready for violence. We wanted to be better than our fears. The chamber was quiet. Several delegates exchanged glances. The senior counselor, an ancient being from a species Webb didn't recognize, spoke in a voice like grinding stones. A pretty story, Dr. Chen, but intentions matter less than capabilities. Humanity possesses weapons that could threaten the entire galactic community. What assurance can you give that these weapons will never be used aggressively? Webb took a deep breath. I can give you my word, counselor. But I understand that isn't enough. So here's what humanity proposes. We will decommission 70% of the Directive's weapons. The Earth satellite network will be reduced to civilian purposes only. The Mars installations will be dismantled. The lunar bases will be converted to research stations. And the remaining 30%? The Thracian demanded. We'll keep the asteroid belt defenses and the perimeter stations, and the von Neumann probes will remain on standby. Webb met the Thracian's glare. We have a right to defend ourselves. The Calthrine proved that. If we'd had no defenses, Earth would have been conquered or destroyed. We won't leave ourselves helpless again. 4 million weapons is hardly helpless, someone muttered. True, Webb agreed. But those 4 million weapons will remain in defensive positions only. They won't approach other species' territories. They won't threaten trade routes. They'll simply exist as a deterrent against anyone else who thinks humanity is easy prey. The senior counselor was quiet for a long moment. You're asking us to trust you? To believe that a species capable of building such weapons in secret will restrain themselves from using them? Yes, Webb said simply, because that's what we've always done. We built these weapons 200 years ago and never used them. We forgot about them and pursued peace instead. Even now, after defeating the hegemony, we're not demanding territory or tribute. We're just asking to be left alone. The Zentari ambassador stood again. The Zentari Collective supports humanity's proposal. They have proven themselves trustworthy over a century of contact. One defensive reaction does not make them conquerors. Other voices joined in, some supporting humanity, others remaining skeptical. The debate lasted for hours. In the end, the Council voted to accept humanity's proposal with conditions: regular inspections of the remaining weapons systems, humanity's agreement to the Galactic Weapons Treaty going forward, and immediate dismantling of any weapons deemed excessive. Webb agreed to all of it. They were reasonable terms. As the session ended and delegates filed out, the Calthrine ambassador approached. It was Vorath himself, now serving as his species' diplomatic representative. Admiral, Vorath said formally. Or should I say Ambassador Webb now? Admiral is fine. I hear you've taken up diplomacy. Losing a battle tends to redirect one's career. Vorath's expression was hard to read. I spoke in your favor during the debate, told them that humanity fought only to defend their home, that you offered mercy when you could have pursued our fleet back to Calthrine space. Thank you. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't. Many in the hegemony still want revenge, but I saw what happened. I know you could have destroyed us completely. Vorath paused. I told the Council something else too. I told them that humanity's weapons weren't the scariest thing about you. What is? The fact that you built them and forgot. That you became peaceful not because you were weak but because you felt safe. And that you felt safe because your ancestors loved you enough to build weapons they hoped you'd never need. Vorath's voice softened slightly. That kind of civilization, Admiral, is either very foolish or very wise. I'm still not sure which, but I respect it. Webb didn't know how to respond to that. We're just trying to survive like everyone else. No, Vorath said. You're trying to be good while staying strong. That's much harder. 6 months after the war, Admiral Webb stood in the new Historical Defense Studies Center that had been built outside Geneva. Dr. Chen's team had created a museum of sorts, documenting Defense Directive Olympus and the weapons it had spawned. School children toured the exhibits, learning about their ancestors' paranoia and the weapons that had saved them. The message was carefully crafted. Understand your history, respect your defenses, but never become what you feared. Webb paused at an exhibit showing Dr. Amira Okafor, the woman who had designed the original directive. Her personal logs were displayed, showing her evolution from fear to hope. In the beginning, we thought aliens would destroy us, she had written near the end of her life. We built weapons to fight the darkness, but when the darkness turned out to be light, we were glad to put the weapons away. I hope future generations never need them. But if they do, I hope they remember. We built these tools out of fear, but we hid them out of hope. Be worthy of that hope. Dr. Chen joined him at the exhibit. She died in 2152, 4 years before first contact. She never knew if her fears were justified or if her hopes were naive. She was both, Webb said. Her fears saved us. Her hopes made us better. We're keeping the probes on standby, you know. All 4 million of them. I know. And I think that's right. We'll hope we never need them, but we'll keep them just in case. Webb turned to her. That's the lesson, isn't it? Not to forget our weapons, but not to worship them either. To stay strong while pursuing peace. A tricky balance. Everything worthwhile is. They stood in silence, watching children point excitedly at displays of the lunar railguns and asteroid fortresses, a new generation learning about the weapons their ancestors had forgotten. Above Earth, the remaining satellites kept their patient watch. In the asteroid belt, mining stations continued their work, weapons concealed but ready. And in the vast darkness between stars, 4 million von Neumann probes waited in silence, improved and evolved. Guardians humanity had forgotten and then reluctantly remembered. The galaxy had learned a lesson too. Humanity was peaceful but not helpless. They preferred trade to war, negotiation to conquest. But they had turned their cradle into a fortress once, and they remembered now where all the weapons were hidden. It was a deterrent and a promise. Leave humanity alone, and they would be the best neighbors anyone could want. Threaten them, and you would discover what paranoid ancestors could build when they loved their children enough to prepare for the worst. The galaxy chose to leave them alone. It seemed safer that way. And in Geneva, in a quiet office overlooking the city, Admiral Marcus Webb looked at reports from across known space and allowed himself a small smile. Trade was increasing. Diplomatic relations were strengthening. Peace was spreading. His desk held 2 items, a piece of lunar rock from one of the railgun sites and Dr. Okafor's final log entry, printed and framed. We built weapons because we were afraid. We forgot them because we chose hope. If you're reading this, then fear came anyway. I'm sorry. But I hope you also choose hope. Stay strong, stay safe, stay human. Webb touched the frame gently. We're trying, he said to the woman who had died 2 centuries ago. We're trying. Outside his window, Earth turned in the sunlight, peaceful and protected. A fortress pretending to be a garden, and wise enough to know the difference mattered.